two dicks, wow.
Yeah, here we go, here we go, here we go.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast.
And having to go, yeah, but he did kind of do this.
What I'm hearing is you just want Tom Brady dead. Like that's all I'm hearing at this point. You just want Brady dead.
Well, not anymore. He's retired now, so I'm good with that. I don't want him calling games anymore because holy hell, he's hard to listen to.
Enough angry and, depressing from myself. Sterling, thank you for being able to sit there as my therapist for this episode.
Start the game already!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling coming back at you this week as we finally actually got a moment to sit back and record after the last few weeks have been a little bit of chaos and a little bit of busyness. But, buddy, how you doing on this snowy, shitty Saturday?
I'm doing all right. I mean, at least it's only today that's snowy shitty. It was nice most of the week, and it should be nice again coming up. But, it was a bit of a morning, going through a bunch of technical difficulties. I'm sure you guys can tell I'm a little bit darker. The ring light's acting up for me, and then Discord's acting up for us. So it's been a trek. And, the last couple of weeks, you had a very busy weekend calling the Canadian Basketball National Championships, essentially, is what it was.
Yep.
And so there was that, and then there was an illness going around my household. So then I was laid out for a week. So it's been a crazy couple weeks for us.
Yeah, and of course, all of this stuff started when a lot of the NFL news that we really, really wanted to sit down and talk about was happening. For instance, free agency started 2 weeks ago. And then, we're starting to see even more stuff happen. And obviously, a lot of stuff for both of our teams and the implications. And so this week is kind of going to be a little bit of like a free agency recap over the last couple of weeks, just because, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. Typically what happens is we come on here the first week of free agency, we talk about the big moves, and then we kind of sit back and go like, okay, the second week, kind of what would have been last week. We kind of talk about some of the other moves, some of the moves that we like, dislike. And now we kind of just get to talk about it all right here. And I know for both of us, we're going to be heavily talking about the moves that each of our teams made, Steelers and then Bears for myself. And then obviously we're going to chat about some of the moves that we saw go around the league and what we like or dislike about that. And yeah, honestly, I think from where we should start right away is your Pittsburgh Steelers with some of the moves that they have ultimately made, because this was always going to be a weird off-season for the Steelers, because it was difficult to know where they were going. Were they going to try to go all out? Were they going to try to just sit back and go like, this is what we're kind of going to do? And they've kind of been, I hate to say it for the Steelers, right in the middle.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's just like, we keep talking about how they need to start a true rebuild. The unfortunate thing is, as long as they're still winning the division and having playoff football, I don't think they'll look at it as, oh, we need to rebuild now. Until they have a season where they finish below 500 and well out of the playoffs, then they might finally go, okay, it's time to blow it up and start. But unfortunately, they keep winning this division. They keep getting that playoff football. And so then they're like, okay, now we got to go all in. At least this offseason has been a little bit more of splash play, essentially. They've done a lot more. They've made some interesting, unique moves, signings, trades, trying to build this team up. So it's been a little bit easier to watch this offseason because at least they're making some progress. The unfortunate thing still lies in that the most important player on a football team, the quarterback, still is not really a decided position for them. They've got all the pieces around it, and they're talking about possibly adding more pieces around it, but they still don't have that spot. And so that is a concern because you don't know who's going to be leading this team.
Yeah, to me, the Steelers, I've been saying it all offseason, where this is an offseason where you need to make a pivotal decision for what this team is going to be. And we sit back and we go, okay, the coaching, we both sit back and say this is probably a mistake, but then again, we've both said that it's probably just a bridge coach for the next couple of years, just to try to see what this team can do and where it can go. But then it's also the question of, well, what's going to happen with your quarterback spot? And right now, you only have two quarterbacks on the roster in Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. Now, I know throughout the entire season, you and I have talked about, well, Will Howard could potentially be the guy for this team, and we know Mason Rudolph is a capable quarterback to go in there and play. He's probably not going to win a ton of games for you, but he's someone that can give you a halfway decent shot. I sit back and I say right now, and I've been telling you this for a while, just go with Will Howard this year, because if you bring in a veteran quarterback like a Kirk Cousins, like a Aaron Rodgers, all you're doing is saying, we're going to have the roster that's capable of winning 9 to 11 wins. If you have a veteran quarterback, that's the exact same thing that we've seen since Ben Roethlisberger retired, and even the last few years of Ben Roethlisberger, essentially, where it's just not anything different. If you at least have that with Will Howard, and you have that 9 to 11 wins with Will Howard, and then let's just be real here, it's going to be a first round wild card exit. If you have that and Will Howard plays somewhat decently, you can go, okay, maybe we can build off this. But if he plays bad, it's going, okay, well, we know what we need to do. And that's the thing, is that if Will Howard gets into that range, he's clearly played well enough that you can at least try for him for at least another season. But if he plays bad enough, then you just go, well, we were trying to go with a 5th round pick as our starting quarterback this year, someone that we liked, and it was his first year, but the team was bad. We only won 6 games this season, and now we're in a prime spot for a quarterback. To me, that is the ultimate win-win scenario for the Steelers this year, rather than being in this quarterback limbo of where you're just going like, okay, it's just a retread of going, can this old veteran without a home get us over that hump and win a playoff game?
Yeah, and I agree. Like I think it should be Will Howard too. I know they're not going to do that. That's their backup plan.
Yeah,
and that's everything I've seen. That is just it. Will Howard is the backup plan. If Aaron Rodgers decides not to come back, or if they can't find another veteran, then they will shift to Will Howard in that situation. But that is not their intent, despite the fact you and I saying that's the best thing they should do. They're not going to, unfortunately. And that's what it comes down to. We've got 2 quarterbacks on the roster, Will Howard, Mason Rudolph. They like to go into training camp with 4. So they are going to draft a quarterback, and they are going to sign a veteran. That is what they will do, no matter how much we want them to do something different. Unfortunately, that's it. We can hope for the best that, maybe it is Aaron Rodgers, and we get into training camp or preseason, and he blows out his Achilles again. And then the Steelers are forced into going the Will Howard route. But I mean, who knows? They may decide to pivot off of Will Howard even. If they don't get the draft pick they want in the first round, maybe they shift and they go, okay, we're going to bring in Ty Simpson, and it's Ty Simpson and Will Howard are going to compete for that future of the quarterback role here. And so I don't know, man. That's why I say it's nice everything they've added in, but we don't know what's happening at quarterback at this point, and so it's going to be very interesting to see. The addition of Mike McCarthy, that is a decent bridge option because it goes away from what they've done historically. It brings in a very offensive-minded guy who is really good at getting offenses rolling. He's good at putting up stats, points, all of that. So it's going to be exciting to watch football, and maybe it will shift the mindset and the dynamic of the Pittsburgh Steelers to be focusing more towards the offense and going, okay, as long as we have a top 15 defense, we can be good. Instead of this mindset of always, we have to have a top 3 defense and then not being able to because all the other offensive units around the league are so good right now.
Yeah, it is the thing where I have slowly been chipping away at you since we've been starting this podcast of going like, that mantra of defense wins the championship. It's you also, yeah, defense wins championships, but you need an offense that can get you to the championship game. And we saw that exact thing with the Seattle Seahawks this year, where it's, that defense was good all year long, don't get me wrong, but it was that offense that ultimately was able to bring them there. And Mike McCarthy is going to make improvements to this offense. This is going to be the best play caller that the Steelers have had since Bruce Arians, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be an improvement. Is it going to be enough of an improvement? We will have to see. But some of the moves that ultimately the Steelers have made when it comes to the free agent market have been some interesting ones. Obviously, their big ticket free agent, Jamal Dean, the corner coming over from Tampa Bay, 3 years, $36.75 million, and that as a corner, that is a fairly solid deal. Again, the Steelers, ever since they drafted, why am I forgetting your
Joey
top
Porter Jr.
Joey Porter Jr. Thank you. Ever since they drafted him, it's always been like he is our number one corner, and we're just cobbling together, a secondary around him. And it feels like every single corner that they've brought in at this point has been okay, but hasn't been great. At least with Jamal Dean, what this affords the Steelers here at this point is someone who is 29 years old, will be 30 in the midst of next season. So he's definitely on the little bit of that older side of things, but is coming off of playing some decent ball. Now, the only worry that I have, and this is something that I will say when it comes to teams, is when you look for a free agent, the last thing that, like, let's say for instance you are a team that's looking for an edge rusher in free agency, and you sign a edge rusher from a team that also for the entire season was like, man, if only they had an edge rusher. It's kind of like when the Bears signed Deo Odangbo from the Colts last season, where it was like, okay, they signed an edge rusher, but the Colts also were looking for an edge rusher basically their entire season, and they let this guy go, and you signed this big name guy. The Bucs were a really bad defense. However, Jamal Dean was a bright spot on that defense. And the Bucs losing him is tough, but coming into the Steelers, this at least gives you a really solid number 2 corner.
Yeah, it gives an already established number 2 corner, whereas we've seen in years past, like you said, they've tried to cobble it together. They've tried guys like Jalen Ramsey. Last year we had James Pierre, who started to finally find his footing and was getting better. He left in the offseason this year as well to go to the Minnesota Vikings, and so that was a point where we all thought they were going to re-sign James Pierre, but I think with Jamel Dean being available and how much of a shutdown he is, they looked at that and went, if we can shut down the outside, along the sidelines, then it's up to our safeties, and then we just have to fix the safety play, which we still have Jalen Ramsey on that roster who can play both nickel and safety, and then it's just a matter of shoring up the rest of that safety squad, which was riddled with injuries last year and tough. Like the Steelers were having to go out and trade for Kyle Duggar just to fill those voids with all the injuries that happened at that safety position. That was how Jalen Ramsey ended up being a safety to begin with, was just the injuries piled up.
Yeah, and the other corner that you brought back was Asante Samuel Jr., who, before he got injured, he was a top young corner in the NFL, ultimately signed with you guys as a practice squad member last season, didn't really see much time. I thought that was a really smart re-sign as well, because it was just a 1-year deal, but you are at least able to see if you can have something there. But you go back and talk about the safety spot. You brought in two safeties, both on kind of 1-year deals. Darnell Savage was the first one. He comes over from the Buffalo Bills. And then a move that we both kind of called pretty much since the end of the season, Jaquan Brisker going back to Pittsburgh from where he's from and signing there, obviously leaving the Chicago Bears. A little bit of a bittersweet moment for me because Brisker was a player that I really, really liked, but the question mark that I always had about him was, can he stay healthy? And when he did stay healthy for an entire season, this was arguably his worst season of play up until the game where he played against the Rams, where if he played like that for, let's just say, 8 games in a season, he's being talked about as a number 1 safety in the NFL. So this was kind of a low risk, very high reward signing for the Steelers, in my opinion.
Well, and it makes for interesting drama going towards the draft as well, getting a guy like Brisker, because we talked early on about all the positional needs the Pittsburgh Steelers had. And so far we've been talking about the defense, and they filled those voids. The voids on defense that we talked about were the cornerback and safety. It was all secondary. They are pretty well set at the edge rusher position. They are stacked at the linebacker position. They have one of the better D lines in football, despite having one of the oldest D linemen playing. He's still a top 10 D lineman in the league.
Yep.
And so it really was the secondary needed to be fixed this year. And the additions of Jamel Dean and Jaquan Brisker, especially Darnell Savage, I can take or leave. He's going to be
a rotational guy,
role playing, filler guy who's going to help hopefully keep everybody's reps down so everybody can stay healthy, which would be the ideal goal. So I like the Brisker signing. That was one where, I know Mike Tomlin's no longer with the team, but when Jaquan Brisker was coming up to be drafted, Mike Tomlin spoke very highly of him. He wanted him to be drafted into Pittsburgh, but again, Pittsburgh has always been sitting in that mid-20s range for picks. The Bears had been at that point in that 5 to 15 range for their picks. It fell to the Bears before it fell to the Steelers to be able to grab a guy like Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah.
And so having him come home, I think they got him so cheap for that reason. He got a bit of a hometown discount, I think, because it's, hey, I can go home, I can have home cooked meals from mom every week, and my family can come to all the games easily without having to travel to Chicago. It just made sense. So that is a signing I like, and it's something that, as you said, if he performs to the level that he did against the Rams, all of a sudden you go, okay, well, now we're giving him a 3 or a 4-year extension partway through the season and going, yeah, you are here to be our starting safety for the next 4 years.
Exactly. And the Steelers this offseason for the defense, you already put it pretty well. It's just kind of filling in some of those holes and gaps, and it was pretty much just the secondary that had the issues. Going over to the offensive side of the ball, the big free agent ticket item on the offense was running back Rico Dowdle, who signed a 2-year, $12.25 million deal over those 2 seasons. Again, you lost Kenneth Gainwell. This is kind of just the Steelers replacing Kenneth Gainwell with someone who's okay. The Steelers, they're kind of just a running back by committee. It's obviously Dowdle and not Tyler Warren, but
Jalen Warren.
Thank you, Jalen Warren. I was like, I know what the last name's Warren. I just can't remember the first name. It's just going to be a 1-2 punch, which is something that you see pretty much every NFL team kind of adopting nowadays, because not every team can have a Saquon Barkley. And even then, Saquon Barkley start to lose reps as it gets older and older. So yeah, perfectly fine move, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a great addition, really. You look at what Rico Dowdle did with the Panthers last year. He was the workhorse of that team.
Yep.
He did everything, and he was great out of the backfield. And what's so nice about him is he's fairly different from Jalen Warren. Rico Dowdle is really just going to be a straight up the gut, sort of what Najee Harris was meant to be, but couldn't stay healthy. And then you've got Jalen Warren as a change of pace, who can get outside more, is able to catch the ball in the flats, is able to make guys miss or just run them over entirely. And so it is going to make for a really interesting 1-2 punch for sure at the running back. I think they're going to share a lot of reps. What's interesting too, though, is it sounds like this week at least there's been a lot of talk that the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to get a deal together to create a three-headed monster at running back, where Mike McCarthy wants to have a lot of two running back sets. And so they've been in deep talks with the Miami Dolphins to acquire Devin Achane this week, which would be a very unique addition because that is then three different running styles because Achane is different from Rico Dowdle as well. And so having three different running backs and they want to try to run a two running back set, it's going to be really interesting if they can get this done. We've seen the Dolphins are kind of in fire sale mode right now. It seems like they're tanking to try to get that number one pick. You know, you bring in Malik Willis and you go, okay, Malik Willis and Jalen Waddle could have oh, never mind, Jalen Waddle's a Bronco now. And so now really the only offensive piece left there is Devin Achane. And he's going to be looking at this going, God, I'm going to have to carry the ball 65 times a game in Miami. I'm going to die. And this is a guy who's already had lower body issues. And so that could be a concern for him too. You know, a move to Pittsburgh, he's only going to have to carry it 12 times a game. You know, it's going to be shared among the three of them. It can make for a very unique thing. I think it's not the best idea. I don't think it's going to really work in the long run. It'll be unique to see. You know, we've seen teams in the past where they can revolutionize how the offenses are run. You know, when we saw the 12 personnel become a thing and it started to take off. You know, maybe this is the next big thing. I doubt it, but I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. So that was a unique take that I saw this week when I heard they were looking to acquire Achane as well. I'm like, man, Achane, Dowdle, and Warren all in the backfield. It feels like it's going to get a little bit too fighting for reps at that point, unfortunately. But the Steelers have done stranger things, so I would not be surprised to see something like that happen. If they can get him for cheap enough, that will be the key. Because you're with what you've got in place already, you're not sending a first round pick for Devin Achane. And
Yeah,
so
I think I dislike that move for the Steelers because Devon Achane he's a number one running back. This is someone who is a top 10 running back in the NFL as it currently stands, and he's one of those guys where I sit back and I go, if you're trading for him, you're immediately taking snaps away from Jalen Warren. Rico Dowdle is just someone who you paid not a sizable amount of money to, but like an okay amount of money to, just to get like 3 or 4 reps, because Achane, he is so damn explosive. He's out there in the receiving game. You know, obviously we know what he's capable of doing. I don't think you're gonna net a first round pick if you're Miami for a guy like Achane. Chances are it's probably going to be a second round pick because you are in that fire sale mode. I just don't know if I'm the Steelers. I risk giving up a second round pick for a running back when you already have 2 running backs that in the tandem that they have is pretty good. And then let's also not forget that the Steelers did just draft a running back in the second round in last year's draft in Caleb Johnson, who is someone that I was incredibly high on. I just think he was completely misused in that Steelers offense last year. And I think the three-headed monster should be Warren, Dowdle, and Johnson, as opposed to trying to trade for a running back who was on the final year of his deal. And yeah, I would be a little confused by the Steelers on that one.
oh yeah, I agree. I would be confused too. I don't think it's a great move to make. I can see how they would utilize it though. As you said, Achane is a top 10 running back. And so he's going to garner a lot more respect from defenses than either Rico Dowdle or Jalen Warren.
Yep.
You know, and so if they're going for that 2 running back set, I could very much see them. You know, you hand it off to Achane a few plays, that defense starts creeping towards the middle of the field.
Yep.
And so that's when you do I'm going to hand it off to Achane. I'm going to pitch it to Dowdle. He's going to take a zone run to the outside, and it's going to be wide open for him. You're going to see things like that. Or you're going to play action to Achane and then throw it to the flat to Jalen Warren. So I can see how it would work. And you're still going to keep Caleb Johnson there because, again, we saw it last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That running back position was heavily injured throughout the year. Jalen Warren was not able to stay healthy all year. Caleb Johnson was not able to stay healthy all year. Kenneth Gainwell was kind of the only thing that stayed healthy all year.
Yeah.
And we knew Kenneth Gainwell was not sticking around this offseason. He wanted to go to Tampa Bay last year,
Yeah.
and it just didn't happen. So he came to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal. Tampa Bay offered him the deal this year. He's like, I'm gone. I'm going to the Bucks. So we knew that they were going to replace Gainwell. Dowdle is a great addition. I do agree. It would be a little bit silly to just go so all in at the running back position and bring in Achane. If you can get him for a third and a fourth, though, you do it. The Steelers have 12 picks in this draft, and they've got 3 in the third round and 2 in the fourth. You can easily just, we don't need 3 third-round picks. Here you go. Even 2 thirds.
Yeah.
Like, if that's all it costs to get a 1-year rental for a top 10 running back in the league, who then creates a different dynamic look for this offense, I'm willing to experiment with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's groundbreaking. I don't think it's going to turn the league on its head, but it's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
Yeah, and obviously that is a lot of speculation. We'll just have to see what comes down with that one. But the biggest move that I want to talk about for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason was the trade acquisition on day number 1 of Michael Pittman Jr. And when I saw that the Steelers had traded for Michael Pittman Jr., I I had initially texted you going like, oh, hey, the Steelers just traded for Pittman Jr. And your first response was, what did they give up?
Yeah.
And I tried to mess with you a little bit because I knew the compensation and say, well, they gave up a first-round pick this year and a third-round pick for next year. And it was, okay, well, they must not really like some of the wide receiver prospects out there. And I was like, oh, he's actually going to be a lot happier when, because I was trying to get that reaction of like, what are we doing, And I, didn't ultimately happen. And when I finally told you that it was a late pick swap, all I could think to myself was, what are the Colts doing? What the hell are the Colts doing? Because Michael Pittman Jr. is a damn good wide receiver. I actually think the Steelers got their number 1 receiver in Michael Pittman Jr. because there's just something about DK Metcalf to me that I just think I just don't think he can be the number 1 for Pittsburgh. But what this does do, even if Michael Pittman is the number 2, it gives you 2 guys that you can consistently rely on. DK Metcalf is just your big run down the field target, while Michael Pittman Jr. is your receiving threat who just catches a bunch of balls and is just constantly going to be out there. This to me was an excellent move by the Pittsburgh Steelers to bring in Michael Pittman Jr. and then to restructure his deal or give him a contract extension that makes his deal actually cheaper. That was also a brilliant move.
Well, and I think that was the issue the Colts ran into, was they wanted to re-sign Alec Pierce, but doing so made it so their wide receiver room was too expensive.
Yeah.
They had to move on from Michael Pittman. They basically had to choose Pierce or Pittman. And they chose Pierce, the younger option. They could get him for longer. And so moving on from Pittman, it's a mistake by the Colts for sure.
Yep.
Like, why wouldn't you just try to extend him and restructure that deal yourselves instead of shipping him to Pittsburgh? I love this deal as well. Like I said, I didn't really care. I was like, first rounder, okay, so that's their wide receiver that they're drafting in the first round, essentially.
Yeah.
It's an already established guy. And I look at this and I'm glad we got 2 wide receivers now, but it's almost like we've got 2 fringe ones. Really?
That is exactly what
both of these guys
is.
are good wide receiver 2s.
Mm-hmm.
We still need that primary guy, that Puka Nacua that you can just feed the ball to over the middle of the field. You need that primary guy. And so now I see the Pittsburgh Steelers maybe pivoting a bit more to a strong route running wide receiver in the draft that is going to be very good over the middle of the field. Because that is what you need. You need a slot guy that will effectively be your number 1 wide receiver. Because Pittman and DK Metcalf are both going to be your boundary wide receivers. They're going to be your X and your Y. And so you need to figure out who is going to be that slot guy who can be a number one. And if there isn't anybody in this draft, it's going to cause some problems for this offense because they're not going to have that number one guy. You know, I talked to you a little bit about it a few weeks ago where I was like, you know, if it comes down to it, maybe you just move Pat Freiermuth into the slot and you have Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward as your 1-2 at the tight end, but now Connor Hayward's a Raider. And so that's not an option anymore. It's interesting, you know, like I'm happy to have two wide receivers.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not confident that either one of them can be a true wide receiver one, especially with the limbo we're currently in at quarterback. You know, the only quarterback I see out there that I think could come in and truly elevate this offense to be better would be Kirk Cousins, because he's a little bit younger than Aaron Rodgers, and he has shown his versatility to be able to go into a new system, learn quickly, and thrive. You know, he did it in Minnesota, he did it in Atlanta. He got replaced both times by guys that did not do as well. And I think that's the better option over Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers showed his age last year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had one of the best protection offensive lines in the league and couldn't even get DK Metcalf over 600 yards.
Yeah.
And so that is a real problem. Sure, he didn't have a wide receiver too. Whoever's there this year will have that wide too. I don't know if it's enough. We'll have to see. We'll have to see the way the draft shakes out. I could definitely see the Steelers trying to package some of those picks and move up into the low teens, you know, that 11, 12, 13 range. If a guy like Mekhi Lemon is still available at that point, I could see them trying to do that. Otherwise, I'm really not sure. You know, like I said, same thing on the offense as the defense. They went into free agency. They plugged all the holes they needed to before the draft. You know, because it was we desperately need a wide receiver too. You know, we need another running back. They've solved those. Unfortunately, we did also lose Isaac Suomalo, left guard, who's been one of the mainstays for this O-line, to free agency, and so that opens up a new gap, you know. And then losing Connor Hayward as well. I know a lot of Steelers fans weren't really hyped on him. I liked him. I thought he was a workhorse. He did everything that was asked of him. You know, blocked every play of the game and then got one pass thrown his way. Yeah, he dropped it sometimes. You only get one look a game, you're going to drop some of them, unfortunately. So I think they are going to have to take a tight end at some point in this draft, but they can definitely do that with one of those third or fourth round picks easily. That first round pick now, it has to be a wide receiver that they are sure is going to be able to mesh well and complement what DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. can do, or else you've got to get the best possible left guard you can in the draft. And I don't think it's a great option to try and grab a right guard and move him over to left guard. I think they need to grab a guy who is a solid left guard, has played his whole career in college, and will not have to adjust. That has to be, I think, what they should pivot to in the draft, honestly, is if you're going to move up for the best left guard you can get.
Yeah, and obviously there's going to be my mock draft 3.0 coming out a little bit later. We're going to be recording this after, so you're going to actually see who I ultimately pick for the Steelers in this eventuality. One of the things that I've heard you talk a lot about when talking about your team here is the amount of draft picks that they have. You and I have talked about this throughout the week already in some of our philosophies on what the Steelers should do. I hear you say, I want to see the Steelers package some of these picks to move up and do something with it. I sit back and I say, don't do it. And the reason why I say it is because the more bites at the apple you can have, like for instance, if you have 13 picks and you hit on 4 of those players, that's exactly what you want. As opposed to, let's say, packaging 3 of those picks to move up to take a guy and let's just say that guy doesn't hit, then you have 3 picks that you've essentially wasted on someone that didn't even mesh with what you want to do. I just sit back and I go, the more picks that you have, the more bites at the apple you get. And I just constantly sit back and talk about the Rams and the Eagles. The Rams and the Eagles constantly have a bunch of picks. Now, the Rams, they never seemingly have a first round pick, but that hasn't stopped them from being a damn good team because they have a bunch of bites at the apple that allow them opportunities to get a handful of players in and just go, oh, hey, this guy was actually a little bit of a gem. And if we didn't have this pick, then we weren't going to be able to get it. But, different flavors for different people.
Well, and I get where you're coming from. And were this the season the Steelers said, hey, we are rebuilding? Then yes, you use all 12 of those picks because you want youth, you want cheap contracts like that. You use them all if you're rebuilding. They're not. And so you're going to pick 12 guys and you're only going to keep 4 of them on your team. And so you're essentially using 8 draft picks to release guys to other teams that don't have to use a draft pick on them then. And that is my concern there, where it's like, why are you accruing all these draft picks for a non-rebuild year if you're not going to use them to secure specific guys that you really have been pining for? You know what I mean? And that's the only reason. I'm not going to be upset if they take all 12.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be upset at all. Like, great. Like you said, it's more bites of the apple. Maybe we hit a couple of gems that way. But I look at it in terms of, if you're not doing it with the intent of rebuilding, keeping these guys on your team, then why are you burning all those picks when you could be moving up, 5 spots in the first round to grab a specific guy that fits a really desperate need, instead of sitting back and going, well, the guy we want's not here now, so we'll take Ty Simpson, see how it goes, or we'll take Casey Concepcion and hope for the best.
Yep.
That
No.
sort of thing.
Which I sit back and I go, if that's something that is really necessary, then of course. Like, let's say Makai Lemon ends up falling a little bit in the draft, and the Steelers are like, man, we need this guy, and you package that, then yeah, you want to be able to have that flexibility for sure. But Steelers ultimately, for me, if I were to give the Steelers offseason a letter grade here at the moment, I would say I'm probably putting them at a B+, because the moves that they've made have been decent moves, but there hasn't been anything where it's like, oh, this is going to take them over the top. However, it could be a lot worse in my opinion, because I'm going to change my letter grade to an A-, just because I think the moves that they have ultimately made have been really good moves. It hasn't been any move where I've sat back and went like, man, you're really pushing it on like that sort of deal for this sort of player. And you know what? If they keep just the 2 quarterbacks that they have, then that letter grade will bump up to an A. But if they sign an Aaron Rodgers or a Kirk Cousins, this grade immediately drops to a C- for me. Like that is how far that will drop for me if they decide to go that route.
Yeah, see, and I disagree with that entirely. I don't think it drops that far for that. Whereas, like, if this team had a quarterback in place and had this offseason that they just did, it would be the best rated free agency of this season, hands down. If they had a quarterback in place already, everybody would be looking at this going, like, just pick a good starting quarterback, one of the top 15s. If Pittsburgh had that, and you go, they added Michael Pittman Jr., Rico Dowdle, Jamel Dean, Jaquan Brisker, and they've got that quarterback and the rest of the team already there, teams would be looking at this going, yeah, the Steelers won this free agency. And so I don't think the letter grade drops that far. I think A- for now, yeah. When they sign one of those veterans, it drops to a B. And then from there, whoever, they'll draft another one in the free or the draft, and it'll remain at that B point. Like, that's all there is to it. Because honestly, if they just go into the draft or even into, say, training camp with those two quarterbacks and whatever one they draft in the draft, then their offseason does become a C minus. If you don't go in there with somebody established that even if they're not the starter, they can help coach these young guys. Like you sign Kirk Cousins to a league minimum deal because he's still being paid a bunch of money by the Falcons, and he's not your starter, but he's your number two who is then in Will Howard's ear. I mean, saying that's a C minus grade to have a veteran quarterback helping to coach your young quarterback, I just don't agree with that.
In that case, like, yeah, I would say if you sign Kirk Cousins to specifically be the backup, the problem is that the Steelers aren't going to sign a quarterback like Kirk Cousins to be the backup. If Kirk Cousins is signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he is the starting quarterback. Because, and the same thing goes with Aaron Rodgers, is that if it's Aaron Rodgers, then he is definitely not signing
Yes,
to be the backup.
that I agree.
And the reason why I say that I do think it drops down that far is because that, like, it's, you're just wasting everyone's time with this offseason. That's all you're doing if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just same.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, if Rodgers signs, then he is the de facto starter, and yeah, that's a problem. I think Kirk Cousins would be a little bit more open to being like, yeah, I'm going to sign. Okay, you're not going to name me the starter. I have to compete with these young guys and help to elevate them while showing that I'm still better than them. And I think it would be an actual quarterback competition at that point. They wouldn't just name Kirk Cousins the starter. He would have to outperform. I think he would outperform those young guys too, because they haven't had a lot of quarterback development. All Will Howard has had for QB development is Aaron Rodgers, which, granted, he's a great quarterback. We saw what he did with Jordan Love, though. He didn't want anything to do with that. What we've heard is it was different with Will Howard, and he was helping him along. So fingers crossed that that's true. And having a different veteran like a Kirk Cousins in there to give a different perspective, I think would just help Will Howard grow that much more. And like I said, I think Kirk Cousins would be a quarterback competition as opposed to just a de facto, you're the starter no matter what. As you get to training camp and Will Howard is just lighting it up over Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins just looks slow and inaccurate, you're not going to just go, well, he's 38 though, so we have to make him the starter. Pittsburgh's not that way.
I have my doubts with that. Mike McCarthy's gonna go with the surefire hand, I think, and again, there's still a ton of, we will have to wait and see with that. But for me, I just sit back and I go, with either one of those two quarterbacks. I don't hate the idea of bringing in a veteran quarterback to be kind of like that, almost like coach in the room. The Bears did that with Case Keenum last year. They re-signed him this year to basically continue to be that coach in the actual QB room. I just sit back and I worry that if it's going to be one of those two guys is going to go, well, hey, everyone, guess what? We've got our quarterback for the year, and Will Howard might get a game here and there if it's like a little bit sloppy, but I just sit back and I go, it's just going to be the exact same song and dance what we've seen for the last 10 years for the Steelers, of where it's like, guys, what are we doing? And for me, that is why I say it does drop down to that like C minus, because you're just essentially rehashing the same thing. It's okay, can we just hit the advance to next off-season button that we see in Madden? To me, like that's all this season would be for the Steelers.
I mean, you might as well give them that C minus grade now then, because that is what is going to happen with this team. I've said I don't like it or agree with it. I would rather it be Will Howard. That is what I want. But reading, the Bleacher Reports and all the sideline reporters and what's going on in Pittsburgh, that's not what's going to happen. As much as we want it to, it's not. The fact of the matter is they're going to sign one of those veterans. A lot of the other dominoes have already fallen and signed elsewhere, so those aren't options. The only other option really out there is a Joe Flacco. I've expressed to you, my ideal would be throwing a couple of picks the New York Giants way and getting them to part ways with Jameis Winston.
Yep.
Jameis Winston would be an excellent veteran option to add to this offense where there's less question about whether he should be the number one or not, whereas a
Totally.
lot of people will be like, oh, Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins has to be the number one. If it's Jameis Winston, a lot more people will be like, well, he's a really good motivator, but does he have to be the number one? So
He's a great guy to have in
that
the
would be the
locker room.
best one for me,
Mhm.
but that requires cooperation from another team to get that one done.
Yep.
And I haven't even heard any whisperings of something like that. So I don't know if that's even something that would come to fruition, whereas we've all heard the speculation of Aaron Rodgers and the possibility of Kirk Cousins, and even the humor of Joe Flacco going, I wouldn't mind completing the set.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, my letter grade right now is an A minus, but once one of those signings happens, then it drops that grade significantly for me because it's
Which it will.
for the reasons I've stated. Now again, I'm trying to be optimistic and say they're not going to do that. They're going to say, you know what, we're going to put all of our eggs into the Will Howard basket. We really like this guy. Might as well see what we have from him. But like you said, we are going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, and honestly, the only way that happens is a perfect draft. If the Pittsburgh Steelers have a perfect draft, they get the exact wide receiver they want. They fill that guard spot with somebody they're confident in, and they look at everything else that falls, and they go, and Mike McCarthy's like, I can make this work with the young kid, and then it would be a competition between Will Howard and either Ty Simpson or whatever other quarterback the Steelers opt to draft this year. It would be a pure quarterback competition of two young guys to see which one Mike McCarthy can run this offense with. But that's the only way. It would require an absolutely perfect draft because I think that's what we're waiting on is once the draft is over, if the Steelers are like, we don't think we can win the division with these quarterbacks in this team, okay, call Aaron Rodgers, call Kirk Cousins, whichever one of them. Okay, come in. You're going to be the guy. And that's what's going to happen, And I've said, I don't like it, but the writing's on the wall. I see that's what's coming. And so I would rather just roll with it and try to figure out the ways that the pieces are going to fall into play so that maybe something good comes out of it because they've obviously opted to not go the rebuild route, which you and I have been saying for like 4 years needs to be what they do, and this was the year to do it. You got rid of Mike Tomlin, you brought in a Mike McCarthy who can establish and rebuild a team. And so this would have been the year to do it, really.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was a part of the contract go, okay, well, we'll give you a shot this year. We'll try to get as much as we can. If it doesn't work out, we're going to blow it up next year and you're going to stay here and help us rebuild for a few. I don't know. I don't know what's happening there, but honestly, I can see what's coming, and that is what's going to happen. Is it's going to be draft a guy in the third or fourth round, sign Aaron Rodgers, most likely, because this is the only team he'll sign with. I don't like it. I would rather Kirk Cousins if I have to have one of those two veterans. Give me Kirk Cousins, because at least he's shown he can be humble if he has to take the step back. If he performs badly the first 3 weeks and they go, okay, look, this isn't working, we're going to go Will Howard now. Kirk Cousins will sit back on the bench and go, okay, let's help this young kid. Aaron Rodgers is going to just go Antonio Brown on the situation if you try to pull something like that on him.
Yeah. It's going to be really, really interesting. But that is the
It's going to be a
Steelers.
messy year for the Steelers again.
Yeah.
That's all it is. A messy year, probably find some way to fuck up and win the division again, and then we're just going to be right back to it again next year.
That is what the Steelers have done so far this free agency. Now jumping over to my Chicago Bears, who, the last 3 years, the Bears have won the offseason. They've been the champions of the offseason. I do not expect them to be the champions of the offseason this year, mainly because they were kind of put against this weird cap situation of where you had a few players that you would love to cut because they're bad contracts, but you can't do it this year because the amount of dead money that you'll have is exceptionally high on what they would be. Next offseason is where you can get back to going like, we're going to go right back to winning the championship, being the champions of the offseason. However, the moves that the Bears have made, I have found very interesting. Obviously, their first big move was Kobe Bryant, the safety from the Seattle Seahawks, coming over. To me, this is a really, really good move. This is one of those players that I sat back and I said to myself, you know what? He is perfect for a Dennis Allen defense because he's versatile. He started his career out as a boundary corner. Then he played a little bit of nickel. Then he's played both of the safety positions. So he has played every single position in the secondary. And with him going into year number 3 as being a safety, we saw him play really, really well in that Seahawks defense, and he was utilized properly. 3 years, $40 million, $13 million a year for a safety who's still young, growing, and getting better. I can't be upset with this one because the Bears needed safeties. The Bears needed an upgrade in that safety department and on defense in general. And they got someone young who can be a kind of a little bit of a leader.
Yeah, that was an excellent grab by the Bears because, like you said, they needed not only to fill the holes that were being created at that safety position, but they needed an upgrade. Jaquan Brisker wasn't quite getting it done. Kevin Byard, a little bit older. It wasn't meshing quite right with Dennis Allen's defense. Kobe Bryant is an excellent addition to that. He is going to be that workhorse. He's going to be that essentially quarterback of your secondary, which is going to take some pressure off of those corners as well, because I feel like the cornerbacks have been feeling the last years like there's more pressure on them. They have to help cover for the safety mishaps that had been happening. And so that had been causing some problems. I think Kobe Bryant really locks that down. It gives you that option as well. If you want to run that nickel instead, then you have because you have another safety. I'm trying to remember his name right now.
Well, we had no safeties going into free agency. It was essentially like all the safeties that we had on the roster were free agents. The Bears technically now have 3 safeties because Kobe Bryant comes in. We ended up signing Cam Lewis, a safety from the Buffalo Bills, and then we re-signed Elijah Hicks, who was also a safety on the roster. But if we're talking about nickel, we have Kyler Gordon. Kyler Gordon is one of the best nickel corners in football, who I've heard a lot of people talking about going, hell, if you need that little bit of extra safety help, you can put Kyler Gordon at the safety position as well, kind of similar to a Kobe Bryant of where there is that versatility. Obviously, the Bears still need another number 1 safety on this team because, you know, guys like Cam Lewis and Elijah Hicks, those are rotational guys that are very much like, okay, we're going to have him on this play just because we need to give Kobe a second to breathe.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, maybe Kyler Gordon is that option. That was the guy I was thinking of because I always viewed him as that fringe safety nickel guy. You know, almost like a young dynamic Jalen Ramsey, if you will. And so I sort of looked at that and like I would be moving Kyler Gordon back to that safety spot, if not one of your other cornerbacks, because you guys are stacked in that cornerback room, and so. If one of them is capable of that shift, that would be a great move to make. But yeah, Kobe Bryant, that was definitely a good move by the Chicago Bears to shore up one of the bigger holes in that defensive unit.
Yeah, the other big signing come in free agency was a linebacker that you know all so well, and that was Devin Bush coming over from the Cleveland Browns. And this is a move, when I initially saw it, I got a little bit scared about because Devin Bush this last season for Cleveland was one of the best linebackers in football. He played up to the standard that the Steelers thought they were going to get from him. Now, if you talk to any Steelers fan, like I'm talking to now about Devin Bush, it's immediately, ooh, have fun with that. But if you talk to people in Seattle when he played with Seattle, it was, you know what, like he was a decent linebacker. You know, he wasn't someone that we ultimately really wanted to keep long term, but you know what, he played well for us. And if you talk to any Cleveland Brown fan, they're devastated that they lost Devin Bush. And they go like, man, this guy was one of the players that really made this defense one of the best defenses in football last year. And it's a tough one. Now, he was playing alongside Carson Schweschinger, who was the defensive rookie of the year. But you also have to sit back and say, was the reason why Schweschinger was able to play that well was because of the linebacker that was beside him. Both of those two guys clearly have talent and both played off of each other. I like this move for the Bears because it's a 3-year, $30 million deal. So it's $10 million a season. That is cheaper than what you're paying Tremaine, or what you were paying for Tremaine Edmonds, who up to that point hadn't been really great for the Bears up until last year, where he was playing great football. Then he got hurt, and then it was kind of just back to what we saw. I trust Dennis Allen to be able to get Devin Bush back to that Cleveland Browns form. But even if he isn't that same level, I still expect DA to be able to get him better than what we've seen from any of the other teams that he's played for. That's me putting trust into coaching, and I trust Dennis Allen. But yeah, this one still scared the hell out of me.
Understandable. But I mean, you look at the trend of Devin Bush's career, he has been getting back to form.
Yeah.
You said it well, though. Which one of those guys last year in Cleveland was elevating the other? Was Devin Bush elevating Schlesinger to help him get that point? Or was the addition of Schlesinger what created the ability for Devin Bush to finally elevate to where he should have been? Unfortunately, what happened with Pittsburgh was bad injury early in his career, and he just never bounced back from it. He played scared from that moment on until he left Pittsburgh. Still saw a bit of that when he was it Tampa Bay he went to next, I
Seattle.
think? Was it I thought he went to Tampa before he went to Seattle. But no? Okay, well, either way, when he went to Seattle, we saw him start to get a bit more of that confidence back. Went to Cleveland, played much better. The thing I will say about Devin Bush for you is, even if he does regress a little bit, say back to those first little bit of time in Seattle, at the very least, you're going to have some fun times watching him play against the Packers, the Lions, and the Vikings, because Devin Bush, he thrives on rivalries. That was one of the reasons the Steelers wanted him so badly, is when he's playing a rival, he turns it up to another level. He puts it to 11. And that was why they wanted him. They wanted a guy who was going to take it to the Ravens, who was going to embarrass the Browns. And he was able to do that until that injury, and then he just couldn't quite find it again. We saw a little bit of that in Seattle when he was going up against the Rams and the 49ers. We were seeing those flashes. And then last year with Cleveland, he played some of his best games against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore, against Cincinnati, going up against some of the better quarterbacks in the league, in Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And so that addition, at the very least, even if he regresses a little bit, within your division, he is still going to be a dominant force and help you guys win, especially those division games, which is so key in this league. You can have a mediocre season, but if you dominate your division, you get to play season number 2, which is the playoffs. And that opens up a whole new window to get yourself to that Super Bowl. And so this is a good signing for a relatively low price, where say he doesn't perform up to the level you guys want, but he's still showing flashes. It gives you the opportunity come next off season before the draft, next season before the trade deadline. You can shop him around. There will be teams that may be interested in a guy like that at $10 million. So that is an excellent deal that gives you guys a back door to get out of if he's not hitting Dennis Allen's system. So I like the deal myself. Yes, you're right to be scared, because if we get the scared turtle Devin Bush of years 2 and 3 after he had that bad injury, then, oh God, was he bad at that point. Especially for a guy that you traded a bunch of draft capital to move up to number 10 and grab. That's why he was such a letdown in Pittsburgh, because it was one of the first times they moved up that high in the draft to get a guy, and it was a complete bust for them. But we've seen his career trajectory. He has improved. He's gotten that monkey off his back. I don't see any reason why he should regress, barring some injury that just messes him up again.
Yeah. And the biggest notes of why the Bears ultimately went after a guy like Devin Bush was simply he is speed. He is a very quick, and that's what Dennis Allen wants. He wants speed and aggression on the defense, and that fits that bill to an absolute T. Bears made a handful of kind of just like depth pieces. I already talked about a guy like Cam Lewis. We re-signed Elijah Hicks. Contavious Street is a defensive tackle rotational piece. Neville Gallimore, Canadian kid out of Ontario, played his time last year with the Colts, spent some time with, I think, Dallas and New England. So this is a guy that's more of like your pass rushing defensive tackle who's going to get kind of some of that. Nothing terribly crazy. James Lynch was another defensive tackle that was brought in. On the offensive side of the ball, you re-signed Braxton Jones to a 1-year, $5 million deal where he has essentially $4 million in incentives. So that's a really cheap thing. That's a move that I like because Braxton Jones last year was hurt, didn't really get a ton of playing time. And with Ozzy Trapillo being out for the entirety of next season, you need that tackle. And I think that was a really smart move to bring back for the Bears. It was, hey, it's a 1-year deal. You're getting one more chance to show that you can be a starting caliber left tackle in the NFL, which he is. Can you elevate yourself to that next level? But I also like the addition of Jedrick Wills coming in from the Cleveland Browns as well. Jedrick Wills was a former top 10 pick and kind of a little bit similar to the Devin Bush scenario of where after his rookie season was playing really, really well, battled some injuries after that, and has just never been able to get to that same level. But if Wills can stay healthy, I think he will be the starting left tackle for the Chicago Bears this season. And if he's healthy and he gets back to form from what we saw of him as a rookie, the Bears might have sneakily found themselves their left tackle of the future. This was a move that I really, really liked because it's a cheap 1-year deal. It's basically saying, can you get into the room? Dan Rochar is a really good offensive line coach. You're going to be playing beside the best offensive lineman in football if you just simply go off of who won the best offensive lineman award in Joe Thuney. Like I'm excited about that move because obviously it's such a low risk, high reward.
It is. And that's just it. It felt like there was a bit of that on this Bears O-line this offseason with the signings. It's, like you said, with Jones there, it's incentive based. It's like, hey, if you can make sure Caleb stays safe, you get all this money, and you either A, get yourself your next big contract with us because you proved yourself well, or B, you show the rest of the league how good you can be, and you go get your next big deal somewhere else. Either way, if you perform up to the standard to get this full contract, you're going to get paid next year. And if you don't, well, it's lose-lose at that point. We don't lose very much, and you lose everything at that point. There is a very big hole in your offensive line now all of a sudden, though, from some surprising news that happened was it right before free agency or just as free agency was opening, which I knew, like, you had a rough day that day.
Yeah. That was a couple of days before free agency kicked off, and the Bears Pro Bowl center, one of the best centers in the NFL, in Drew Dalman, after signing a 3-year contract with the Bears last offseason, decided he was going to retire at the age of 27. And when I saw that notification pop up on my Twitter feed, because it was actually kind of ironic, because that entire day, everyone woke up in Bears Nation going, this is a day where you're going to want to refresh Twitter, because the Max Crosby news is like, it had that feeling of like, okay, Max Crosby could be traded to the Bears today. Like, everyone just kind of had this feeling, and so it was refresh, and it was breaking news, Chicago Bears. It's like, really? And it was Pro Bowl center Drew Dalman retires at the age of 27. It's pardon, what?
Right.
And so Drew Dalman has not officially spoken on this, but the rumor out there is that Drew Dalman's dad played in the NFL for a lot of years, and he's a smart guy. Drew Dalman's from Stanford, so he's also a really smart guy. And the rumor going around is he just kind of looked at his dad post life in football and was like, there's a lot of complications with basically being in that. And when you play on the lines, whether it's the offensive line or defensive line, you are getting into a high speed car crash every 45 seconds. That is what's happening. And for smart guys that go to Stanford like Drew Dalman, he's probably looking at this going, you know what? I've made like $35 million over my career. That is game-changing, life-changing money. That means my kids are going to have the best education. They're going to have the ability to be in a spot that they want to be. I am still healthy enough and mindful enough in my head, because obviously we know the NFL with CTE, where I can go out there and work and continue to not just take a bunch of punishment, but also just have a healthy and happy life. That is kind of the rumor that's been going around. And yeah, so it's devastating, because as someone who has been a Bears fan my entire life, I got to grow up watching one of the best centers to ever play the game in Olin Kreutz. Should be a Hall of Famer in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Once he retired, it's just been this merry-go-round of what the fuck at center. You've had maybe one season where Cody Whitehair came in. He was drafted as a guard, and the center that we did have potentially going in, Hannes Rousseau, ended up getting injured during preseason, and they're like, okay, Cody, we need you to play center this year. And it was like, I've never played center. It's like, we need you to play center. And funny enough, he actually became a Pro Bowl center, and every Bears fan was like, yay, we got one. And then at that moment, it was every single year after that, it was just downhill at that center spot. And we've just been in this merry-go-round. Bring in Drew Dalman, top 5 center in the NFL on a really good contract. You're like, boom, we got it. It's great. And then, yeah, Bears did make a trade for Garrett Bradbury. I'm perfectly okay with this move. This is a low risk move. This is someone who was just a consistent center all year long for the Patriots. He's not going to wow you, but he's also not going to make you sit back and pull your hair out. Now, granted, I don't have a lot of hair to pull out, so that's a positive. There is a player in the draft that the Bears are going to target. Make sure to stick around for the mock draft, because I will be talking about that. But yeah, Garrett Bradbury is a player that I describe the Bears as they like Garrett Bradbury, but they don't love him. And they are going to draft someone this season who I think they love and is basically a Drew Dalman clone. So
yeah, and consistency you said about Bradbury, and that is what is so important at that center position. That's why we've seen a lot more failures lately of guards trying to shift to center, because the dynamic we've seen in the league over the last decade, where it's becoming so much more offensive minded, it's created the edge rushing position being so coveted as well. Which what happens because of that is because they're coming around the outside edge, outside the tackles. It spreads that offensive line out. It has made the center position so much more difficult to play as a result, almost to the point where center almost needs to be valued as much as your left tackle now, because of the fact that it used to be that O-line stayed very tight together. And so the center really just had to snap the ball and go like this and just hold everything back.
Yeah.
Whereas now, because it spreads out so much, that center needs to snap the ball, go like that, and then spread out and step back and be able to pivot left, right, whichever way the hole is opening up. And he has to fill those gaps just like the guards have to. And so you're essentially playing center and guard at the same time, being a center now, which is why so many teams try to shift a guard to that center role. But the reaction time has to be so much faster to be able to snap the ball and get back into that position. So few guys can do it. That is why it is such a tough position to fill now. You know, we see so many teams, and there's probably only about maybe a dozen that truly have a star, great center that can do the job. I mean, Jason Kelsey was one of the best to do it in our generation.
Mhm.
After he left, it's we're trying to find someone to fill that role, and it's going to be tough for the Bears. I've seen it in Pittsburgh for the longest time because it was after I'm spacing on his name for some reason. He was there for so long. Um, he retired the same year as Ben Roethlisberger did. I just can't recall what it was. They were in that same sort of limbo, that same
Yeah.
sort of hell, trying to find that next center, and they possibly grabbed one last year when they drafted Zach Frazier. So, maybe the Steelers are okay. But yeah, the Bears, Bradbury is a great stopgap. But if they see somebody in the draft this year that they love, then I agree. They need to really hone in on that and try to grab that because it is such a difficult position to lock down now.
Yeah, and you're seeing centers even basically start to snap the ball and then go out wide and almost becoming a tackle.
Right?
Excuse me, but it's one of those moves where again Bradbury is a perfectly fine center, and we'll just have to see. And again, I wish Drew Dahlman nothing but the best in retirement. I hate the fact that he did retire, but that was a very aggressive kick in the balls, I'll say.
Oh yeah. That was very shocking, especially as you said, with it being the day that everybody was expecting the news of the Max Crosby trade coming, whether it be to the Bears or somewhere else. That was the day everybody was expecting it, and so Bears fans seeing that breaking news pop up, they were like, "Yes, we got him." No, we lost our center.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean the Bears have had a busy offseason thus far too. They've been sort of a little bit opposite of what my Steelers did. They've been kind of selling a little bit more as well because you guys did trade away one of the key pieces that you guys brought in to help build what you have right now in DJ Moore.
correct. Now, the situation with DJ Moore, obviously everyone kind of remembers the play at the end of the year where DJ was kind of seen seen not really running as fast as he possibly could have or running the right route, and it caused an interception that ultimately cost the Bears the win against the Rams to potentially go face off against the Seahawks. And there was obviously that everyone said the right thing in that department where it was, it was a miscommunication on the route. And the other thing that I will say is that people forget that DJ Moore was in concussion protocol throughout that game and basically just told the training staff, fuck off, I'm fine, I'm going back out there and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And so you have to wonder how much he was banged up throughout that game, and just coming off of playing the Packers the week prior to, where that was a physical matchup. We saw him get beat up in that game. But the biggest
No,
thing here for the Bears with this DJ Moore thing was they knew they had to fix the defense. And with DJ Moore, the problem was he was making a lot of money. He was making the most money on the team this season. You had guys in Rome Odunze and Luther Burden at the wide receiver position, and you simply looked at that and went, Luther Burden could very easily be a top 15 receiver in the NFL as early as the midway point next season. Like, what we saw from Luther Burden at the end of last year was, oh my God, this guy is a sleeping giant, and he's just potentially starting to wake up here at the moment. People forget Rome was a top 10 pick, and before he got injured last season, he was performing like that top 10 wide receiver. But the other big thing people forget about this is that the number one weapon on the Bears is going to be Colston Loveland, who is already a top 5 tight end in the NFL and is the offensive rookie of the year this year. I know he doesn't have the award, but if you've watched this channel, you know my opinions on that one. Colston Loveland is the offensive rookie. Ted McMillan, you can go fuck yourself. But
yeah, and so I mean it made sense for the Bears to be moving on from DJ Moore, and really, this was one of the most amicable move-ons we've seen in a while.
Yeah,
There was no disrespect, there was no animosity at all. They found a good place for DJ Moore to go to. They
correct.
got a good return on investment from him. As DJ said, like he was happy to be part of what the Bears are becoming. He's sad to not be there for the final payoff,
Yep.
but without that DJ Moore trade, the Bears look very different right now because the Bears don't have
Devin
Caleb
Bush.
Williams,
Yeah, wait, exactly.
or any of the other pieces that they've got right now. And so DJ Moore was a driving catalyst. So I was glad to see them move him somewhere that he could potentially elevate back up to that number one. And as you said, a lot of people were down on him after that Rams miscommunication. But you got to remember, the week before that, he was the one that caught the ball that beat the Packers.
Yep.
And so, like, you can't blame the guy for that when he's in concussion protocol the whole game. He won you the game the week before, him and Caleb Williams. Like, it's DJ Moore is a stand-up guy. He is a great wide receiver. I'm excited to see what he's going to do in Buffalo because we could see
Yeah.
finally an exciting Buffalo offense. Josh Allen, James Cook, DJ Moore. This could be a wild year to be watching the AFC East.
Yeah, and one of the stories that I ultimately heard about DJ Moore is that he actually called Ryan Poles' son, who was the biggest DJ Moore fan out there, and basically said, "Hey, I want you to know that I love the Bears. I have a lot of respect for your family. I don't want you to be mad at dad. This is just simply a business move." Like that is like a stand out human being type thing to do. And even Ryan Poles said, like, listen, I didn't really want to make this move, but this was a really good deal and we can't say no to it because of where we are on this team. And it's one of those things where everyone just sits back and it's kind of one of those things where two people break up and everyone just goes like, man, they were really good together, but like everyone kind of just sits back and goes, we get it, we do, like this kind of needed to happen.
It was time.
It was time.
And like I said, I'm glad they shipped him somewhere that he's going to have a competent quarterback at
Correct.
least. It would have been really disappointing to see them trade him to like the Miami Dolphins or the Arizona Cardinals or something. That would have been very depressing to see.
Yeah,
There
that
were
would have been a
only
slap
few
to him.
teams I was really hoping to see him go to. The Bills were one of them, and so I was glad with that.
Yeah, me too. I'm happy for DJ. I don't love the fact that the Bears do have to play the Bills this year because it's going to potentially be that slight little bit of revenge.
Yeah, we've seen how DJ Moore performs against his former teams, but
Yeah.
that was more when there was animosity involved. He didn't like the Panthers,
Yeah.
and so he
Yeah.
wanted to stick it to them. I think with the Bears, it might not be that way, but I mean, who knows? It'll be a fun game to watch either way.
It's going to be slightly terrifying, but yeah, for me, my letter grade for the Bears this offseason, I give them, like, when I was first thinking about this letter grade, I was gonna potentially give them like a B minus, but I sit down and I go, you know what? I think it's a B because you look at all of the moves that this team has made so far, they have just been the right moves. You're not overpaying for anyone because again, Kobe Bryant, you're not overpaying for a safety. Devin Bush, you are definitely not overpaying in that contract. And then you look at a bunch of the 1-year deals that the Bears have ultimately signed. And it's just been moves where you looked at and went, yep, makes sense. Yep, makes sense. And then the two trades that they've ultimately made. You're giving up a 5th-round pick in 2027 for Garrett Bradbury. You're acquiring a 2nd-round pick for DJ Moore. Let's be honest here. Most people were saying that it was going to be like a 3rd or a 4th-round pick to get DJ Moore. And the fact that you were able to get that is big. And so, yeah, for me, I say it's a B. It's right in the middle. And for me, I've said this entire offseason, the biggest thing for the Bears is the draft this year. If you nail the draft, then you set yourself up for a Super Bowl potential year this year. And free agency has just been right in the middle. Hasn't been sexy, hasn't been flashy, but it's just been the right moves.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's a solid B for sure. This would have been up in that A minus range if not for the shock Drew Dahlman retirement. I really think that hurt the Bears and forced them into making other moves that they might not have needed to make.
I
So
still even
yeah,
feel like with
even then,
the
like
Drew Dahman, it's
solid
still
B
B.
because they didn't do a ton. It wasn't a splashy, flashy free agency. But
Exactly.
we've talked about it. Your Bears are at that point where, like we say it about all the teams. If you have to make a lot of big moves in free agency, your team's not in a good place.
Yeah.
Like the Steelers. They got to make a lot of moves and they got to bring in big names to make the team better. That is not what you want. You want to be able to be building your team through the draft, which is where the Bears are finally at now, where it's we just got to grab a couple of guys in free agency, re-sign a couple of guys, and then nail the draft. And that's where the Bears are. And so it really is. It's, you don't have to be the winners of free agency anymore because you've built the team effectively enough that you can just focus on those drafts.
Exactly. And obviously, to ultimately come to the closing stages of this one, there's a lot of moves that ultimately happened. The thing before we talk about some of the free agent moves, I want to talk about this entire Max Crosby situation because we knew Max Crosby was going to be traded this offseason. The writing was very clearly on the wall. And like I alluded to a little bit earlier, the only way that this offseason for the Bears is an A plus or in the A category was if they got Max Crosby. They didn't. When I saw the news that Max Crosby was traded to the Ravens for 2 first-round picks, I went, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm happy the Bears didn't pay that price because, that is the most a non-quarterback player has ever gotten at the age where he's at. The oldest player that has ever been traded for, and now technically still the oldest player that has ever been traded for 2 first-round picks or more, is Khalil Mack at 27, and he had just turned 27 when he got traded to the Bears initially. Everyone else that has been a non-quarterback has either been 25 or younger. So that was a big move. And then, 2 days later, you see the big news of, the Ravens are backing out of the deal because they have concerns about Max Crosby's knee. And everyone was like, pause for a second, fellas. You do realize he just had surgery 8 weeks ago, right? On that very knee that you have concerns about? Yeah, we knew that. And so you expected him to come in and pass a physical? Yeah. On a knee that was surgically repaired 8 weeks ago. Correct. Have you talked to his surgeon? No. We've talked to our guys. Did you talk to his surgeon? No. So you're fucking dumb. No.
Yeah,
And then
I know.
immediately the next day, when free agency opens, they immediately go out there and sign Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals to a 4-year, $112 million contract, where it's like, huh.
Yep.
So, Baltimore, sure not really having any of that buyer's remorse on Max Crosby, huh? You saw a player that was going to be cheaper and not injured, and you're not going to have to give up 2 first-round picks. And so you kind of just quickly backed out of that one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And that was exactly it. They thought the price for Trey Hendrickson was going to be much greater. They thought he was going to garner more attention, more teams, a higher salary. And when they saw what teams were offering him, the teams that he was talking with, they went, oh, we can get him cheaper than Max Crosby without giving up 2 firsts. Let's fail this guy's physical.
Yeah.
And immediately got cold feet. And it's just, this has made the Ravens organization look so bad because everybody around the league, everybody who's a fan watching it, we all were like, well, trading for Max Crosby right now is a little bit silly because he can't pass a physical because he just had his knee reconstructed. We all knew that. People that aren't in the medical profession knew that. Like, we knew he wasn't going to. That's why so many of us, myself included, was like, I don't expect Max Crosby to actually get dealt until like July when he can pass the physicals. Because that will be the key point is if you can't pass that physical, most teams aren't going to want to give up a first, let alone 2 firsts. And so it's That's why it was so shocking to see it happen so early, and then hilarious to see them start backpedaling and go, nope, nope, never mind. Especially with some of the stories that started coming out subsequently after that, where it was, Trey Hendrickson was like, yeah, it was really, the ceiling factor for me was coming to Baltimore to play with Max Crosby. Oh, hold up a second.
Yeah.
Actually, you're gonna just be the sole edge rusher again, like you were in Cincinnati. You have Roquan Smith. You have a linebacker at least, and you have Kyle Hamilton, who's a safety. So you have two other big guys that you're playing with, just not another edge rusher.
Yeah.
You're still going to be the guy that's expected to do all of that work.
You have Jesse Minter calling the defensive plays, which is going to be great because Jesse Minter is a defensive genius. That's going to be great,
Yep.
but and I feel really bad for Max Crosby in this situation because of the conversations that were had. Because he goes there, he's talking with all the people. He's excited to be in Baltimore. He's kind of put into his mind that like, hey, like I'm a Raven now. And he's chatting with people. He's like, "Yo, I want to go talk with the GM and just like dap him up." And people are like, "Yeah. Let's go talk to him." And he's like, "I'm getting this weird vibe." And like he had a great bit on his podcast about this, but it basically said when he met Eric DaCosta, the Ravens GM, the vibe was just completely off. Where it was basically just like, "Oh, he didn't really want to look me in the eye or this sort of thing, wasn't really chatting with me a ton." And then he kind of sits me down, basically did the "hey champ" kind of conversation, and was saying like, "Oh, we're really worried about your knee." And at that point, Max Crosby isn't sitting back like caring about that he failed his physical. It's like, is my knee a lot worse than what it was? Like he basically left that and like called up his surgeon and was like, all right, and like, am I like, is this worse? And his surgeon basically said like, no, dude, you're ahead of schedule. Like everything that is needed to be done is perfectly done here at the moment. Like you should not be worrying in the slightest at the moment. Like I don't know why these guys didn't come call me. And so not only are the Ravens shitty about this entire interaction, causing the panic for a player who is trying to recover from this injury, it to me is the biggest slap in the face with this entire situation.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just complete disrespect for the player and his mental state. Like it just, uh, there's no words, man. The Ravens have just all they've done is they've made themselves a bit of a laughing stock.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're in the AFC North and they're like, oh, well, the Steelers can't get their shit together. The Browns are the Browns. The Bengals never want to spend money. We got to find a way to make the rest of the league hate us too.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
Now they do. The only thing I'm sort of disappointed with is I really wish the Raiders and the Ravens were playing this year.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because Max Crosby would probably kill Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, you want to talk about breaking the single game sack record, which is 7.5. Max Crosby's getting 10.5 in that game.
Yeah, this would be like a Bobby Boucher level game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he'd be out there just full water boy all over the Ravens offense.
Yeah. Now, the last little bit here, talking about some of the big free agent moves that we saw. Obviously, we talked about Trey Hendrickson going over to the Ravens. That is a big move for them to get because they get a pretty elite edge rusher. Tyler Linderbaum goes from the Ravens to the Raiders on a 3-year, $81 million deal, which if you talked about anyone who was kind of projecting what players were going to be making for their contract, everyone said Tyler Linderbaum was probably going to make around $81 million for the entirety of the contract. Most people said 4 years instead of 3. That kind of tells me that Linderbaum was like, I don't really want to play with the Raiders, but you're offering me $81 million over 3 years. Like, I imagine this is how the interaction went. It was, John Spytek was like, hey, we really want you to be with the Raiders, 4 years, $81 million. And Linderbaum was like, ooh, you want to make that 3 years? And they're like, oh yeah, we can bring that down to 3 years and bring that down to what? And it was like, no, 81 for 3. And it was like, really? Do you want me? And then the Raiders were like, yeah, we'll get beat up if we don't make this move because our offensive line sucks.
And that's just it. They had to make this move. I don't even know if the conversation went quite like that. It might have even been more of a Tom Brady going, look, everybody else is offering him 80 for 4. We're just going to offer him 80 for 3 and get this out of the way now. You need a center for Mendoza. One of the reasons I was so good is because I had consistency at center with a good quality guy that I could build a relationship with. Give him the 3 years. If these guys build excellent chemistry, then when that contract comes back up, he's going to go, well, yeah, I still want to be the highest paid, but let's do it for a little bit longer this time, space it out.
Yeah.
It's going to work perfectly for the Raiders. So honestly, like I said, we did it a couple weeks ago where it was a sort of a mock of what do the Raiders have to get done to turn this team around really well. And Linderbaum at center was one of the key pieces for me, was getting that big name center because, we talked about a little bit ago with Drew Dahlman retiring, and now the Bears are back into this sort of limbo trying to find that secure guy. It's so hard to find it. Linderbaum has been one of the bright spots at that center position since he entered the league. He was a guy that I wanted the Steelers to draft in his year, but the Ravens picked before us, and they grabbed him first. And so that was something we couldn't do. It's the fact the Ravens let this guy go when you've got a guy like Lamar Jackson, it blows my mind. Like, the Ravens are going to realize the mistake they made by week 1.
Yeah.
It's not going to take very long. It's going to be week 1. There's going to be a mishandled snap, a fumble, something, and they're going to go, oh, we fucked up. We fucked up.
Yeah, and like here's the thing. Tyler Linderbaum, like we talked a little bit earlier about Drew Dahlman being a top 5 center in the NFL. Tyler Linderbaum is only in conversations with one other center in the NFL, and that's Creed Humphrey. Those two guys are 1A, 1B, just depending on who you like a little bit more. That's what the Raiders gave up. They're paying this guy $27 million a season, the highest paid non-tackle contract ever in the NFL. And it's not like he's just going to immediately fall off the map, because you forget who is now the offensive play caller for the Raiders. Yep. Kubiak is coming in from Seahawks. It's not like he's a bad play caller. He's pretty freaking good at what he did. And this is a good move for the Raiders. They have spent a lot of money, bringing guys like Kwity Paye, the edge rusher. That was kind of the move to replace Max Crosby. Now those two guys get to play with each other. They brought in Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, reuniting that linebacking core from Georgia a handful of years ago, signing Jalen Naylor from the Vikings. The biggest thing that I have concerns about with this team is the lack of other offensive linemen that they've really brought in. I said you need at least 4 new guys, and at least 2 or 3 of them need to come from free agency, and they haven't really done that, so I'm still kind of concerned for Mendoza's health. But all in all, this has been a really, really productive offseason for the Raiders.
Yeah, well, and I think if not for that Max Crosby trade falling through, we see them sign another offensive lineman. But with that contract coming back to them, the Max Crosby deal, I think they kind of had to pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they were like, "Ooh, okay, we may have overspent a bit now that we've got Max Crosby's, what is it, 34 million or
I think it's
whatever,
like 30, 28 to 30
back on the books." And so that definitely hindered them. Linderbaum getting the highest contract for a non-tackle offensive lineman, that tracks for me. I said it earlier in this podcast where the center position has become so much more valued,
so important,
that it needs to be up there with that left tackle, that blindside tackle spot. Like, those need to be the 2 keys on offense for your O-line. And the Raiders are taking that. And it makes sense because you're going to have a rookie in Fernando Mendoza behind center. And then you've got Ashton Jeanty, who we still think is likely to be one of the most explosive running backs in this league at some point in the first contract of his career. It's going to happen. He didn't have an O-line last year. He still doesn't, but at least he's got a piece of an O-line now. And depending on what the Raiders do in the draft, maybe he gets one or two more that just fit well. Because as you said, Kubiak is the coach now. You get a couple of young guys in there with Fernando Mendoza, another young guy. They all are on the same page together. We've seen nobody's become a great O-line in short order. And so that could happen in Baltimore or in Vegas for the Raiders. And now, like outside of that, the big question is who else is Fernando Mendoza going to have to throw the ball to outside of Brock Bowers? That is a big thing. Yes, you said they brought in Naylor. Great. He's going to be a great wide receiver 2, maybe. He's like a fringe 2, in my opinion.
Yeah.
2-3. So they do still need to do something there. You know, and what happens, we'll see. But Linderbaum, that was a great acquisition for the Raiders, I think. The Ravens have just had a dog shit of an offseason.
Horrible.
Let Linderbaum go. You lose Isaiah Likely to the Giants. You lose that Max Crosby trade because you get cold feet. I don't know. That was a lose trade for them either way. Because you're giving up 2 firsts for him. Sure, you're getting Max Crosby, but now you don't have a first round pick this year or next year. I don't know, man. The Ravens, it feels like they're grasping at straws because they're like, we have so many good pieces and we still can't beat the Steelers and the Bengals consistently. I'm like, yeah, because you fucking dog shit. And now it's gonna be worse because the latest rumor I heard is that we're gonna bring in Tyreek Hill, and honestly, the Ravens are starting to feel like the team that guys go to for retirement.
Yeah, basically just
they're
like
past their
D-Hop,
prime.
Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry is
Right?
still playing pretty good football there.
But more so for the wide receivers too, because D-Hop, like you said, I don't know, man. I think the Ravens are going to see a significant regression this year in their quality of play. Losing your big center, losing what should have been your new franchise tight end to keep Mark Andrews around instead. And no disrespect to Mark Andrews. He's been phenomenal his whole career. But it's kind of swan song time for his career. It's the end. You had Isaiah Likely, who has been phenomenal, and now John Harbaugh left and just took him with him to New York.
Yeah, well, and Isaiah Likely was the better tight end last year as well. And not only that, but they kind of lost their fullback who did a lot of good stuff. And, Cam Scatterbo over in the Giants has a new crayon eater that he gets to play with. Here we go. But yeah, the last kind of other big free agent move that I want to talk about is the Carolina Panthers going out there and saying, hey, Jalen Phillips, what have you done so far in your NFL career? It's like, I've been an average edge rusher when I haven't been injured. And they're like, cool. How does 120 million sound over the next 4 years? And Phillips was like, hey, yes. The Panthers continue to make no sense to me. Like, this is a team that has spent a fair whack of money this offseason. I'm just going to pull out all their big moves. Getting Devin Lloyd from the Jags from the linebacker spot, I actually like that deal. 3 years, $42 million, 14 AAV. Devin Lloyd was a phenomenal linebacker for the Jags, was one of the best pieces on that defense for the Jaguars last year. I don't understand the Jalen Phillips contract, though, where it's just like, we need edge rusher. This guy, it's almost like they looked at PFF's top-rated edge rushers, and they're like, this guy young, this guy rated high, let's give him all money. And this just kind of feels like the Deo Nangbo signing to me, with maybe a little bit more upside, where you're just like, this is like a good player, but you are going to regret this contract for a lot, because you're paying him $30 million for a guy that hasn't stayed healthy his whole career.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's kind of what the Carolina Panthers have to do. I don't like the move either.
Yep.
But it really is one of those things where it's like, you almost have to pay a premium to convince a guy to come play in Carolina
Yeah.
because you know the GM is not good and that the team could potentially just be absolute dog water. We've seen them over the years. Like they tried to do this miraculous rebuild and they have stumbled again and again and again. They finally had a halfway decent year last year on offense. Their defense sort of cost them a few extra games, and so that's why I think they've spent a little bit of extra on defense this year, looking at it
Oh,
going,
oh yeah.
hey, let's try to shore this up a bit. I think it's going to unfortunately offset in the opposite way. Like, sure, they still have Chuba Hubbard, but you lost Rico Dowdle, who was one of your key playmaking units on that offense outside of Tet McMillan. And so now you're going back to Chuba Hubbard going, okay, we're going to try this again and hope that he stops fumbling the ball. We'll see.
It's
But
going to be really funny when the Panthers make all these moves saying we're going all in to win this division to still lose to the Saints.
it will be funny when they, yeah. Yeah, that division is so bizarre though.
It's
You
so
know,
bad.
teams that have no business winning games go out there and win games against division rivals. It's so strange. So yeah, I definitely could see Panthers and Saints splitting their season series this year. Um, I I think the Panthers will still be a little bit better. Problem is, a lot of the league is getting a lot better, and so they still may end up seeing regression despite this extra spending that's happening. I think they would have been better off spending that money on offense and then trying to find an edge in the draft. Would have been a better way to go about it, in my opinion. But this is the Carolina Panthers. So they just, like I said, to convince guys to go play in Carolina, you're going to have to pay them a little bit of extra money.
Yeah.
And that's what they've done with Jalen Phillips here. It's it's not an ideal contract. It's not going to go well for them because unless he somehow becomes a top 5 edge rusher, then you have no value on him. And so you're stuck paying this contract because nobody's going to look at this and go, he's really good. I'll trade for him. Not going to happen.
Yeah. Not at that contract.
No, no. I'm surprised that was the one you wanted to talk about. I thought you were going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons doubling down on their whole quarterback situation that's been developing over the last 3 years, where they just make bizarre move after bizarre move.
I knew this was something that you definitely were going to talk about, so I was like, I'm going to let
Yeah.
him talk about the Atlanta fuck-ups.
Right? So, I mean, as most of you should know by now, and if you don't, the Miami Dolphins cut ties with Tua Tagovailoa, leaving his $100+ million contract still on the table, dead cap space. They're like, just get out. We don't need you here anymore. And the Falcons were like, we like that guy. Let's go get that guy. Tell him to pack up his blue tent and bring it with him to Atlanta. He's going to play with Michael Penix. And so the Atlanta Falcons this year are going to have Michael Penix Jr., Tua Tagovailoa on a league minimum, admitted, so it's cheap, but they have told him to bring his blue tent with him because they're going to need 2 of them on that sideline in Atlanta, so that, Michael Penix and Tua can share one of them, and then the other one can be used for the rest of the team. What is going on, Atlanta? Like, you gave Kirk Cousins a huge contract 2 years ago, and you're like, this is our guy. We brought him from Minnesota. He's going to get us back to the Super Bowl. He's the best quarterback we've had since Matt Ryan. Ooh, let's draft an overage Michael Penix Jr. in the draft of the same freaking year instead of drafting Romo Dunze and getting a wide receiver option for Kirk Cousins. Let's get another quarterback that is so overaged that by the time Kirk Cousins' contract is done, Michael Penix Jr.'s rookie deal will have him at 30 years old. And then after that, they're like, we're gonna cut you, Kirk Cousins. We'll still pay you your money because it's guaranteed deals. So yeah, you go. We're gonna bring in Tua Turndaball over to play with Michael Penix Jr. Like, what in God's name is happening over there? And the fact that Matt Ryan is like the the guy in charge of a lot of these decisions now, and it's like, really? Is this just, the second chance factory now? Is that what the Atlanta Falcons are becoming? Like, we're gonna bring a guy in that has more concussions than Antonio Brown at quarterback and hope for the best? Like,
Yeah.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, I the only reason that I have heard people try to make sense of this is well, Michael Penix is a left-handed throwing quarterback. Tua is also a left-handed throwing quarterback. So when Michael Penix gets hurt, inevitably, that the offense isn't going to have to change much going from lefty to righty. So Tua comes in. And the only thought that I could think of was like, well, when Penix gets hurt and Tua has to come in, what are you going to do when Tua gets hurt? You don't have a third left-handed quarterback on the roster. So,
Right.
like, what are we doing, guys?
Are there any left-handed quarterbacks in the draft this year?
I would need to double check, but I don't think so.
If there are, that's what they're gonna do. Like, oh my god, because that's what's gonna happen. Is Penix is gonna go down with an injury of some type.
It's gonna be like a lower leg injury,
right? And Tua's gonna come in and go, "My name is Cam Scatable," right? Put head down, run, and then he's gonna get knocked clean out within 3 plays, and the Falcons are gonna go, "Oh shit, what do we do now?" And Kyle Pitts is gonna be going, "I knew I should have gone somewhere else.
I knew I shouldn't have signed that. God damn it, I shouldn't have signed that deal." But yeah, no, the Falcons are a goddamn mystery of what they're trying to do.
Right? Like, at least on the other side of that move with the Dolphins, it's still absolutely mind-boggling what they're doing, but it makes more sense. It's very clear that they are looking at this going, we want number 1 pick next year. They are paying more than half of the salary cap this season to players not on their team anymore.
Yeah.
The salary cap is what, 302 million or something like that, I believe.
Something like that.
They are paying 152 million dollars
to players
no longer on their roster. They're paying more to dead cap than, I think it was something like 12 Major League Baseball teams pay their entire salary.
Yeah.
Like, it is unbelievable what the Dolphins are doing right now. And that was why earlier on I was like, it wouldn't shock me to see them trade Devin Achane as well.
Oh, I'm not going to be shocked when they trade Devin Achane. No. Like, they're going to. It's just going to be like,
I know. It just, my god.
Here's a way to think about how much the Dolphins are playing players to not play for them. The NHL salary cap is about 90 million. So for the entirety of an NHL salary cap, the Dolphins are paying more for players to not play for them than an entire NHL roster plus half of another team.
Yep.
Like, it is. But you know what? Like, for the Dolphins, good. Like, it's not like they were going to do anything, and so they were going to be bad, so you might as well be bad. This is what I will say about the Dolphins. If you're going to be bad, go all out, baby. Go all out to be really, really goddamn bad.
But, like, if that's the case, too, like, why bring in Malik Willis at that point? But why not just go with the rookie you drafted last year? Let Quinn Ewers play at that point. Unless they were looking at that going, ooh, Quinn Ewers is better than we thought he was. He might actually win us too many games. So let's bring in Malik Willis. But even then, it's like, it makes no sense. And you got to wonder if some of the quarterbacks are looking at next year's draft that are playing in college this year going, thank God it's not my senior year. I am staying in college next year. And the ones that are seniors have got to be looking at this going, fuck. I'm going to have to play for Miami, which, granted, in terms of quality of, like, facilities and team, the Miami Dolphins are the best rated team in the league for facilities and how the team treats families and stuff like that's great. But if you're coming to the NFL to win championships, not the place you want to be, because the Dolphins have not done great things in the last lifetime. I can't even say decade or couple of decades, lifetime, because it's been bad since before the millennium turned.
Yeah, it's been bad since both of us have been alive.
I think they were okay right around when I was born. Were they okay in the 80s? No, it was the 70s, wasn't it?
It was
They
the
were good.
70s and 80s. Like the Dolphins did have some good teams in the 80s, but
Yeah, so
you know.
I might have been barely born at that point.
But the fact that you can't sit down and actually remember a stretch for when the Dolphins were actually good says something.
No, exactly. And so, like, the couple of these teams this off season, like ours have done decently okay at the very least.
Yep.
You know, as a bottom, but you look at teams like the Dolphins and the Falcons, especially,
And you just have a giggle.
Right, that they make what the Ravens have done look good, and we were just shitting on the Ravens, me more so than anybody else. I was just shitting on the Ravens because I think they've had a horrible offseason.
Oh, they've without a doubt had a bad offseason.
Right, and then the Dolphins and the Falcons are just hold my beer, and we're gonna make the Ravens look like saints because oh my god, it's so bad, and yet somehow, as we said with the Panthers, the Falcons will still find a way to beat the Panthers. The Falcons will still find a way to be competitive in that NFC South, because that NFC South division is it's perennially we might see a below 500 team in the playoffs. Every year going into the start of the season, it's like we could see a below 500 team from the NFC South in the playoffs yet again.
I saw a really funny joke halfway through the season. I'm sure I sent it to you, but it said, with the NFC South and the AFC South both being the worst divisions in football, someone said the South hasn't been down this bad in America since the Civil War, which I just started pissing myself laughing, because I'm like, yeah, man, like it bad out there.
It's bad, yep. It really is.
The fact that the NFC South is as bad as it is, and the Panthers, who won their division last year, we're sitting back going like, can they beat the Saints, who were supposed to be one of the worst teams in football last year? And then Tyler Shuck was like, hold my beer. I might be 25, but I can still sling it.
Right? And, you know, with some of these bad teams that there are, I would love to, like, I don't actually want it to happen, but like food for thought, just imagine if we could have every season the worst teams that perform through the off season be in a division together. Could you imagine the Dolphins, the Falcons, the Titans, the Browns all in a division together?
Oh,
no, or throw the Jets in there. Like,
yeah, Jets more than the Titans.
The Titans have had a better offseason this year, but they're still a pretty bad fucking team.
Oh, they're a bad team for sure, but they went out there and spent money, so they've done some stuff. But yeah.
But wouldn't it just be so funny to see some of these really bad teams just be in a division together, and so we have to watch them play each other twice a year? We already get that with the Falcons, Saints, and Panthers, really. So yeah, but just so bad, man. And then there's been some other good stuff that we've seen. As we discussed, the Giants have been having a very quiet, good offseason. Addition of Harbaugh as a head coach, bringing in Isaiah Likely, Patrick Ricard. You're going to have Malik Neighbors coming back. You're going to have Cam Scatterbo coming back. You've still got Jackson Dart there, and potentially a good draft upcoming. Like this Giants team has potential. They also picked up Calvin Austin from the Steelers, has gone over there as well. So that's they
signed
solid...
Tremaine Edmonds as well at the linebacker spot.
Yep. So the Giants are having a quiet, good offseason where we could see this Giants team turn it around and be competitive in what might be an okay NFC East, maybe.
Yeah, we'll
never sure with that division, man.
Exactly. The only certainty I will say with that division is that the Cowboys still suck.
Yes.
Yeah. But that is it for this one, unless you got anything else here for me, buddy. But till then, for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying thank you all very much for watching. Peace.